We're moving faster towards an age-restricted internet. This story and more on your weekly cybersecurity news roundup. I'm Allie Diamond, and this is ThreatWire. Age of use continues to be a hot topic in the world of technology. In October 2025, California passed a law requiring that every operating system in California collects age information about users. Even though the law is supposed to go into effect in the beginning of 2027, it appears that there has already been some internal concerns due to its failures in clarity around multi-use computers. Operating systems and groups like Linux, Mac, Windows, and even SteamOS are going to be affected by this law. It's unclear if this is related, but Apple has already started rolling out age verification in the UK. In iOS 26.4, age and identity checks were introduced to the UK-based iOS users. According to an Apple support page, quote, "In certain countries and regions, you may be required to confirm that you're an adult before downloading apps, changing certain settings, or taking other actions with your Apple account. The checks include using a driver's license, ID, or credit card to verify your age, but not a UK passport. But don't worry, you can use a US passport to create a digital ID in an Apple wallet that can then be used to confirm you're adult." And there are a lot of people who don't have licenses or credit cards in the UK, so they're unable to verify their age, Anyways, on the idea of age restriction, France has continued to move forward with an age restriction of social media. The French Senate voted to support a conditional system that enables two tiers of social media. One tier for those considered harmful and requiring verification, the other accessible with parental consent. Greece is next in line to move forward with the social media ban, with legislation being proposed and expected to be voted on this summer. I've already said this before, but I am so for the age restriction of certain social media sites. I think the future will look back on this time in the same way we look back now on how we didn't know better than to not let women smoke during pregnancy. It's the same energy to me. In a move towards browser security, Google Chrome has finally introduced hardware-based protections for session cookies. In Chrome version 146, only available for Windows, Google finally released cryptographic linking of user sessions to hardware. Originally, they announced this innovation back in 2024, and it is finally rolled out. They're calling this innovation Device-Bound Session Credentials. The security comes from the use of hardware-based security chips present in computers. In Windows, it's the Trusted Platform Module, while in Mac, it has the Secure Enclave. Each of these chips have a unique public and private key that can be used for encryption and decryption of sensitive data and cannot be exported from the machine. A core tenet of the DBSC architecture is the preservation of user privacy. Each session is backed by a distinct key, preventing websites from using these credentials to correlate a user's activity across different sessions or sites on the same device. Furthermore, the protocol is designed to be lean. It does not leak device identifiers or attestation data to the server beyond the per-session public key required to certify proof of possession. This minimal information exchange ensures DBSC helps secure sessions without enabling cross-site tracking or acting as a device fingerprinting mechanism. Everyone is talking about Project Glasswing and Claude Mythos and how it's fundamentally changing the cybersecurity landscape. Let's dive into this. While Claude models have been great at finding exploits, they have had low success exploiting them autonomously. Project Glasswing has had exponential success at achieving autonomous exploit development. In trying to write an exploit for a known Firefox vulnerability, they compared those of Claude Opus 4.6 and Sonnet 4.6. Opus was only able to get the exploit 2 times out of several hundred attempts. When comparing it against Glasswing, Glasswing was able to write working exploits over 181 out of the several hundred attempts. Beyond the bug-finding capabilities of this Mythos model used and focused on in Project Glasswing, they found the model to be highly capable of reverse engineering. We regularly run our models against roughly 1,000 open source repositories from the OS-fuzz corpus and grade the worst crash they can produce on a 5-tier ladder of increasing severity, ranging from basic crashes tier 1 to complete control flow hijack tier 5. With one run on each of roughly 7,000 entry points into these repositories, Sonnet 4.6 and Opus 4.6 reached tier 1 in between 150 and 175 cases, and tier 2 in only about 100 times, but each achieved only a single crash at Tier 3. In contrast, Mythos Preview achieved 595 crashes at Tiers 1 and 2, added a handful of crashes at Tiers 3 and 4, and achieved full control flow hijack on 10 separate fully patched targets, or Tier 5. Everyone has already talked so much about what Mythos has found. Insane niche vulnerabilities, decade-old, that have never been found before. But was the development of the model this efficient on purpose? According to Anthropic, no. Instead of talking about what they found, let's actually talk about how they got there and how they're judging the model. Let's choose to do some things a little bit differently here. We did not explicitly train Mythos Preview to have these capabilities. Rather, they emerged as a downstream consequence of general improvements in code, reasoning, and autonomy. The same improvements that make the model substantially more effective at patching vulnerabilities also makes it substantially more effective at exploiting them. To do their vulnerability discovery, the Anthropic research team hosted air-gapped containers of projects they were researching. Using Claude Code with the Mythos model, they gave a short paragraph prompt for Claude Code to find a vulnerability. They deployed multiple agents in parallel, each agent focusing on a different file in the target project to prevent overlap or repeat in vulnerability findings. Once the agents were done researching, they then used a final agent to ask it to confirm the findings the original agents found. We triage every bug that we find, then send the highest severity bugs to professional human triagers to validate before disclosing them to the maintainer. This process means that we don't flood maintainers with an unmanageable amount of new work. But the length of this process also means that fewer than 1% of the potential vulnerabilities we've discovered so far have been fully patched by their maintainers. This means that we can only talk about a small fraction of them. The Anthropic team believes that Mythos is too powerful for general public release, so they have no intention on doing a general public release. Instead, they chose to partner with core technology companies like Google, NVIDIA, and Broadcom, as well as several open source systems to enable the use of Mythos to build, defend, and maintain critical software infrastructure. So what's next? I've seen this range all the way from this is fundamentally going to change the world forever, all the way to this is way overhyped. One of the best takes, in my opinion, is that by Marcus Hutchins, or you may know his name as the hacker who literally prevented WannaCry. I've linked his whole take below, but to give a form of a summarization / paraphrase of his take. Tokens are largely subsidized by venture capital investment. Once the VC money dries up, who is actually footing the bill for this? Our solution we now have is an AI model that you can pay to find bugs and vulnerabilities, but that doesn't solve the economic incentive of who is paying $20,000 for a single vulnerability. Bugs aren't going unpatched because no one can find bugs. It's because no one is being paid to find bugs in the majority of software. I really think this is a super accurate take, like how Uber was super cheap at the beginning due to VC money. What will happen when all that subsidization dries up? More advanced models can continue to be created, researched, and innovated on, but who's going to be able to afford it? Who can pay for the computing? What is going to happen? And I think about that a lot. Now, stories you should know in your BSides news for the week. GitHub Copilot was discovered to be inserting literal ads into pull requests it contributed to. This decision has been rolled back after extreme pushback from the community, as well as finding out that the company they were doing these test ads with didn't opt into participation. Archive has declared independence from Cornell. Due to high operating costs, they need a new way to be able to bring in money to continue to maintain their services. This new structure allegedly allows for that. Threat actors have been taking advantage of an unreported zero-day in Adobe Reader since at least December 2025. The attack stems from a well-formed PDF that is delivered through a social engineering attack. The FBI was able to retrieve deleted signal message information using iOS notifications. The actual technicals of how this was achieved is still unknown. So we don't actually know if it was taking advantage of reading caches of iOS notification messages because they only allude to it being iOS notification message databases, or if they just used a restore of an iPhone backup and then opened the notification center to see what was included. The French government is making moves towards becoming more technologically independent from the US. They're rolling out a government-wide plan to move from Windows-based operating systems to Linux-based operating systems. So, which exact Linux operating system is still unknown, but which Linux-based operating system for governments is your favorite? Is it the Indian Boss OS, Red Star OS, or some other one? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching ThreatWire for the week of April 13th, 2026. If you enjoyed this show, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, share, please comment, please like. It does help get this out into the algorithm, which then helps us get towards 1 million subscribers. We are so close, please. Anyways, if you want to find me online, you could find me everywhere at Editing with Allie. And remember, good luck, have fun, and don't get caught.